Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yep.
can you hear me great. How are you?
I am good. It seems strange to be meeting on a Friday, but since I can't tell one day from another, what difference does it make? Um, and thanks for the questions, guys. Those were they were some great questions. So I was just on the phone with Eric Lodal, kind of explaining what to expect, and he was impressed with the with the meeting with the questions that you guys sent forward. So, how's everything going? Everybody is okay, I hope. And as we trickle in, we'll get started. My thought is that we'll talk for about an hour and change, and then once Eric, we'll give him a kind of thank you, goodbye, and then kind of regroup to kind of have a final debrief and some thoughts. So that will be the agenda, and you will hear my son again. One of my sons is having what appears to be an intense Minecraft or Call of Duty or some other experience in the background. So uh, there will be much screaming and excitement, but it will be fun. So those were some pretty cool scripts, weren't they, that he shared with us? Um, he has more stuff, but he was feeling, like he was drowning you guys, and I was like, they can take it, send away. They'll figure out how to do it. So it's unusual and pretty generous for a writer to do that, especially with new projects like Simple City, which when he started it, it didn't seem like the world would actually catch up quite so fast, but here we are, and we'll have a chance to talk about that when he chimes in.
I'm here.
And here he is. Hey, Eric, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I, I feel like we're good here and we're lucky to have you, man. And we truly appreciate your willingness to
Pleasure. Let
do
me look
this.
around your office for a second. This is like great snooping opportunity, right?
Yes, take a look.
Like the guitars,
Main
very
thing is a
groovy.
mess. And you'll also, as I was just pre-warning the group, one of my kids is having an intense Minecraft or some kind of war going on online with his friends. So you may hear it's kind of impossible to keep a 10-year-old from shouting at Pierre during that. So
No
um,
problem.
so it will, and kind of we kind of have the philosophy around here that siblings, significant others, pets, and any other interruptions are what make Zoom meetings tolerable. So we have a complete tolerance theory here.
Good.
So I hope
Well,
you
maybe
guys.
you'll be soon.
Yeah, exactly. Eric is joining us from Los Angeles, right, Eric?
Yep.
And here in New Haven, at least where a couple of us are, we're expecting a snowstorm. So as
Are
why
you
not?
really?
Yeah, there's a big snow system coming to New England, so it's like, what the fuck? Why not? Let's just do it. Let's do this. So it's supposed to be a thunder snow. So I think Mary and a couple of other of us here are in. Evelyn probably in for even more of the brunt. So, anyways, we're with you there in LA in spirit, anyways. And so, just a quick rundown. I know we didn't do a lot of background, but Eric is a writer, producer, showrunner, and he's shared lots of stuff with you guys, which is extremely generous. So again, we thank him. He was the creator, co-creator, co-runner of the series Murder in the First, which you guys have had great opportunity to take a look at. The writer script, that's a writer script that Eric shared with you, not a shooting script, which you guys know the difference of now. And and also one of the great screenplays I've seen as I started studying these was Laredo, the screenplay and the Bible. And as we were just saying, Simple City, which you started to write before the world seemed to, in a weird parallel way, start trying to catch up with your imagination. So Eric is also a Yale graduate, and like many of the writers we've talked to or talked of, he can talk to you about his path to screenwriting, which is it's strange, like every other writer.
It is very strange, that's for sure.
Yep, and there's no simple way to do it. And so Eric was is a Davenport College grad, and studied. You were a music and economics major, right, Eric?
Yeah, music and economics, which is really a wonderful blend of mathematics and totally useless.
So you got to do something like you got to fall back on something like screenwriting to
Sort of
make.
fall back on screenwriting, pretty much. I always
Uh,
had a weird thing about studying writing at Yale, which was simply like, well, I was intimidated by it all because when I was there, Harold Bloom was ruling the roost, and to write was quite an endeavor at Yale, and so I was pretty shy about it all. I did not do a ton of creative writing at Yale. I did a few classes here and there, but I mainly just immersed myself in other subjects. And
what creative writing classes did you do, Eric? This is my period, personal
well,
curiosity. Remember?
I took Harold Bloom's Shakespeare, and I got into that, which was a big deal.
Yeah.
And that's not really creative writing so much, but and then I took one English sort of short story class when I was a sophomore that I barely remember.
It's changed and evolved here, and so yeah, Harold, of course, you probably know Harold Bloom died last fall, and like he taught a class on a Wednesday and died on a Friday or something. So he taught right up until the very end. So it was strange to have him around.
Yeah, he was such an institution when I was there, and people were scared shitless of him. And
Still are, and he's not alive anymore.
He would walk around, and you would see him at the like I ran into him at the pharmacy or something, and I mentioned in my crazy little rules for writing that I said, like know how people stand in line at the DMV and stuff like that. Harold Bloom was definitely that kind of character.
No doubt. And yeah, I forgot to mention that the great list of rules for the writer's room.
You sent that to them?
So yes, I did. Right. So,
right.
And
well, that's here's my preface for that. That is truly something I wrote for myself when I was starting out in 2010, and I was having just problems, and a lot of the problems were simply kind of emotional ones of just like finish the script, get the job done, stop worrying about yourself, stop worrying about being precious and perfect, and really, what does it take to be a writer? So I put that thing together. I posted it right above my computer for about 5 years. It was sitting there till I moved houses, and then when I started doing writers' rooms and I started hiring writers, it came up and I shared it with everybody and they kind of liked it. So there's some truth in there, but you'll have to find your own truth. I mean, it's my truth. It helps me a lot. So.
Yeah, we talk about similar things, and one of the parts of the class, and one reason it's nice to have other outside writers come, is this idea of developing your own principles. One way you do it is seeing how other writers do that. But at the end of the day, you read scripts and you write scripts, and that's kind of.
I learned. I mean, I learned by reading other writers' books on writing. In addition to reading, obviously, reading is first and foremost. But I read Norman Mailer's book, The Spooky Art. I read Stephen King's book on writing, which is very interesting. I read Marquez's book. I read Ann Patchett has an interesting book about writing. I just read a lot of writers to try to understand kind of what motivated them. And there's this incredible wealth now of books about being a writer that it's never taught at Yale because it's sort of, these aren't most academic kind of books, but they're certainly interesting and they helped me a lot. So that was one of the first things I did.
Well, one of the things you can do with those, no one writer.
Can I interrupt you though?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, Derek. I want to say hello to the other humans in the room. Is this Alec Wallace? Alex? What's up, man? And Evelyn and Mary and Zach. Is that the group or are there more than that?
There should be
a lot more. I see. Okay. And Olivia, Adrian. Oh my gosh. I thought there were like 3 people on here. Solia.
You are in front of a big room, man.
Hello, Yaleys. Are you guys, raise your hand if you're a senior. I'm so sorry. What a crappy way to go out. Unbelievable. Everybody doing okay? Is everybody at their house, basically? I assume so. All over the country?
We
Wow.
are across the coast with people in the Midwest and literally coast to coast right now.
Wow. Well, it's very cool to have all of you on here, and thanks for reading stuff. And I'd be happy to just, whatever I can do to help, we'll talk about stuff. I can get into it.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely the idea. So you guys did write some questions, and I did pass them along, but just hop on in. Eric is very easygoing, and he will take any question. So Isha, I see. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here and for sending all of your work. I know, like, speaking on behalf of everyone, like, we really appreciate it. That's really kind and helpful of you. My question, I think, would be an interesting one to start off with is you mentioned you have a pretty untraditional way of starting, like, your work within screenwriting. Could you just talk about that and, like, what it looked like from Yale to now and how you got into this?
Well, it was a roundabout way, and I didn't really start writing and getting paid to write professionally until I was 30. So I spent the majority of my 20s involved in all sorts of other pursuits, primarily because I didn't know how to get out to Hollywood. I wanted to come out. I wanted to try to write. I wanted to do this. I had a real mentor and a person I looked up to growing up, a friend of my parents from college. They went to Rice University in Texas. And one of their best friends is a guy named Bill Broyles, who's, to my mind, one of the best screenwriters of the last 30 years or so. He wrote Castaway, he wrote Apollo 13, he wrote Entrapment, he wrote Flags of Our Fathers, he wrote lots of great shit. Jarhead. And I just remember admiring his life so much, and in particular his, the fact that, like, okay, he had a sort of similar journalistic mind to me. I think journalistically in terms of a lot of the ways in which I write and I present worlds. And that's just driven by a curiosity. And he wanted to spend his life learning about new things. And, so Tom Hanks comes and says, I want to live on an island by myself for 2 hours, and you have to figure out how to do this. And that's such an awesome puzzle. And so he was a big inspiration for me growing up. But, I wasn't that close to him. He was sort of from a distance. In fact, he came to Yale and did a Yale lecture and a master's tea right when Apollo 13 was out. And so I had some inspiration like that. But I still didn't really know how to do it. And he wasn't the type of guy I could just sort of send a script to. And at that point. So I basically, I went to Juilliard for master's school. I got a master's degree in music. And then I very quickly decided I did not want to pursue a career in music professionally. Just I wanted to write more and perform less. And the options for me at that point were limited. So I ended up going back down to where I'm from, which is the Washington, D.C. area, McLean, Virginia, which is where I grew up. And at that time in 2001, there was this young unknown dude running for lieutenant governor named Tim Kaine, and he had no staff. He was like third in the three-way primary for the Democratic nomination, which in Virginia at the time was not a solid thing necessarily. But I just thought this guy was really brilliant, and I saw him speak once or twice, and so I just walked up to him and said, I'm looking for a job. Can I work for you? And he had like 3 employees at the time, so I was like employee number 4. And it ended up working, and he became Tim Kaine, and he became a big politician, and we won against all odds. And but it was always kind of like a stopover for me. And if anything, I thought I might get some good writing material from it. I kind of wanted to write something about politics at the time. But then, of course, when you win, suddenly you're a genius. And so I got offered other jobs in politics, none of which I really wanted. I wanted to come out here and to really start to try. So I'd sort of gathered enough confidence to come out here and begin to make the move, but I didn't have money. So the way that I supported myself early on was by writing for whatever reason. I seemed to specialize in Southern Democrats And so Ronnie Musgrove in Mississippi, and when Janet Reno ran for governor of Florida, and all these various people. And in my early 20s, that's how I made money. And it taught me a huge amount about writing, because writing for other people is an awesome job, like an awesome, important responsibility for any young writer to do, because you spend your whole young life as a writer just imagining what you want to write. And then somebody else is going to tell you what they want you to write. And you have to, execute it well, do a good job, match their voice, match their history, match what they're trying to say, match their message, and put something together that sounds like it's actually going to come out of their mouth. And that ended up being like an awesome process for me. So that was my screenwriting school, was politics, ironically, was ghostwriting speeches and op-eds for famous Democrats, and learning very quickly that you can't write a sermon for a lawyer. And all of my speeches early on were like Martin Luther King barn burners, and like you put Tim Kaine trying to read that, and it's just not going to work. And so I had to figure out, how do I communicate this information? How do I do it in the voice of this character? And how do I pull off whatever it is they're trying to pull off, and do it in a quick way, because it's fast, it's politics, and in an effective way. So that was like a really interesting way to learn screenwriting. And I think some of the principles that I learned during that period of my life in my early 20s, I very much hold on to this day, especially the discipline and, just having to do it over and over again. I came out here in 2001 for the first time. This is right after Tim got elected. He offered me a job to stay in Virginia, but I was not going to do that. So I came out here on a wing and a prayer. I literally connected with all my Yale friends. So look at this group of people you guys have right here. These are your most important people. Any of you that really want to be writers, keep on these friendships, because early on, my Yale friends were my lifeline. And some of them had already gotten out here and made a little bit more progress than me. And some of them had agents, and some of them were, doing different things. And so I really connected with them. I started like a writing group. We'd meet every once a week, and we'd give each other assignments, and we'd just kind of get together, and we'd try to write stuff and get it read by people. And it didn't go that great at first. It never does. And the first few years were a lot of trial and error. And I'm in my 20s. I'm an idiot, so I'm just bouncing around, And, so you have to give yourself time to kind of go through some of these young adult machinations. And that's fine. It's all part of the process. But so I ended up coming out here in about 2001, 2002. I spent 2 years out here trying to get stuff going. I managed to write a short film, which is not much of an accomplishment, but at the time it was a major accomplishment. Like just finishing a 20-page script felt like enormous. And I put together a group of people, a producer and some others, that, we were going to film the film, and we went to Montreal and we shot a film, and it was exciting. But I sort of got out of that, and then I had some opportunities, and all the agents and managers were starting to talk to me, and I said, and they all wanted to know, well, what do you have next, right? And I didn't know what I had next. So always have an answer to that question.
Next that you're working on.
What do you have next? What do you have next? Because that's all they care about. What do you have next? And so after a couple of years, I got offered a job on the Kerry campaign. I'm sorry if there are any Republicans here, but I'm obviously a Democrat. I got a job on the Kerry campaign, and I was asked to go back to D.C. and to ghostwrite op-eds for famous Democrats, which again gave me this huge process. Like literally every day, I would have to write 3 or 4 op-eds, and it would be something to the effect of, Wes Clark's going to sign it on veterans issues in Ohio, and you got to write it for that paper. And Carol Moseley Braun's going to do gun issues in Philadelphia, and you got to write it for that paper. And Harry Reid's going to sign something on Yucca Mountain nuclear waste, and it's going to run in the Nevada paper. And these are our 3 hits for today that are going to support the Kerry campaign. And here's a pile of research, and here's their former writings, and here's their phone number. Go. And so that was it every day. And these politicians are not shy, especially when you start to speak on their behalf in the form of words. So I would get many phone calls and many corrections and what the hell is this? And you know, but it was a great exercise in just learning how to write professionally in a way, and a real lesson in just the importance of voice and finding different people's voices and so on and so forth. So that got me through '04. And then, of course, we thought John Kerry was president for about 15 hours on election day, and then that didn't happen. And then I came back out here, and I wrote Laredo, basically, and then that worked. And I can go into that. I've been rambling on for a bit, but that's the short backstory.
Well, thank you so much.
Help me out. Ask me a question. Come on.
Well, yeah, Mary, you've got a question, and
I have a few, but I think one that's been really interesting for me as I've read all of your work, and thank you so much again for sending it, is I love the complexity of the worlds that you build, like this complex underworld in The Simple City and The Murder in the First narrative, or like the complex narratives in Laredo. And I'm curious, as you look back on your work, I'm wondering whether there have been big turning points for you in any of these scripts, and whether it's the development of them or selling them. Like, have there been moments when you've added a character like Joaquin that's completely added a wrinkle to the story? Are there scenes that potentially have like really just dramatically reshaped the look and the feel of the story? And if so, like, how have you come upon like troubleshooting the problems you saw in your own work and then leveling them up in some way?
Great question. It takes time, of course, to basically, you know, you got to write a bunch of scripts and tear them apart a number of times before you feel like you're good at it. So there's some of it that's just mere process and repetition. And that's why I just encourage everybody, no matter what you're doing, if you're really trying to write, you got to write a few pages every day, you know. And so much of it's just trial and error, and you'll throw out 80% of it, and that's fine. In terms of like, were there any huge moments like that? There were early on. For the most part, they were not good moments. For the most part, what I've found is that whenever, like, I spend a huge amount of time thinking about what I'm trying to write about. It's like ultimately if you're gonna do something like this, and you're gonna write something or create a show, it's gonna take up a year or two of your life, at least. And I mean, I've been working on a project right now that like is at the cusp of production that I've been working on for 2 years just to get it to where it is right now. And then of course, coronavirus hits and now nobody's producing anything. But that'll change eventually. But I have weird phone calls right now. You can imagine some of these Hollywood phone calls right now are insane. Okay, we're going to take the whole crew to Palm Springs and rent a hotel for 6 months, and they're not going to be able to see any of their friends or family, and the camera crew will be wearing hazmat suits, and you know, no kissing. We cut all the romance. So this is the life with the coronavirus. But in terms of early on, so Laredo's a good example. So Laredo was the first script I wrote that really took off. And this is 2008, 2009. And I was obsessed. Basically, my family's from Texas. So my mom and my dad, I grew up in Washington, D.C., but my mom's from Fort Stockton, Texas, which is way out there. And God's first draft, as we call it. And my dad's from San Antonio. And so, which is, you know, just north of Laredo there. And so I spent a huge amount of time growing up going to Texas. And for a kid from DC, Texas was just like this bizarre, wonderful world. Tumbleweed and roadrunners and the world's biggest sky and people walking around with cowboy hats and talking about the rain like it's a person. And, you know, I saw the rain over there. Did you see the rain over there? And, you know, and all of this just like triggered my imagination growing up. And so it was a fertile ground for me to write about because I'd grown up going there. And I went back literally just like right after the Kerry campaign stuff, really to just visit some family and see some of the places I saw when I was a kid. And it had totally changed. And not only had it changed just because I'd become older and all these places that I used to think were huge were actually quite small. but also it had changed because it had become like a frontline marijuana depot on like superhighway drug express coming out of Texas. And the local sheriff had just been arrested for having a garage full of cocaine and, you know, crazy people dying left and right, border crisis happening. And I actually, at Yale, my senior essay in economics was on the border for James Tobin, and just sort of on the bizarre economics of the border and so forth. So I was always interested in it. So I just decided this is a story that needs to be told. At the time, The Wire was kind of the show, and it was like, we need The Wire on the border, and that was a little bit of the idea initially. And so I went in and I did that. So now, to very long-winded answer, but to get around, so I sold it to FX, a big sale. It was very exciting. I got fancy agents. I got everything sort of happened quickly for me. And once I sold it to FX, they started having meetings and they started trying to change everything basically. And so, and the death process of that project began. And what they really wanted was the way I wrote Laredo, which if you read, it is kind of journalistic, and I'm just sort of looking at characters dispassionately a little bit. And they wanted something that was much more traditional, central protagonist driven, and they wanted the sheriff there to be sort of one sheriff. They wanted the older sheriff to be the sheriff. They wanted Tommy Lee Jones to be like the older sheriff, and like everything was going to sort of spoke out from him. And so I would have to essentially, instead of just sort of going to Blanca's world or going to the sheriff's world or going to the other worlds or going to the hospital, like I'd have to get there through the sheriff. This was their philosophy. And so I tried. I tried my best, but it killed the project because that's not the project. The project is specifically to look at 5 or 6 different lives in the context of this incredible border crisis, which at the time, remember, this is 2009 when I wrote this, nobody even knew who El Chapo was at that point. I did, but nobody else did. But so I spent a huge amount of time down there. I got into more trouble than I should have. I did some stupid things, and that's what you're supposed to do, I guess, as a young writer. I like rode around in Mexico with cartel dudes and shit. Like, I did stupid stuff.
Well, that project also was a big deal for them at the time. Wasn't that running up against American Horror Story and You, right?
Yeah, we got down. Well, they spent a huge amount. Our project was supposed to be this huge project. Kiefer Sutherland was going to be attached to play one of the sheriffs. This is right after 24. So he was still this gigantic star. And FX spent a lot of money on it. They spent a lot of money on the script, and they spent money on other parts of it, developing it. And we ran up, and this is the first time I just sort of ran up into the zeitgeist, and this happens a lot as a writer. But 2009 rolls around, and remember, we're having the financial crisis. And so the financial crisis of 2009 hits, and suddenly all these Hollywood executives that were gung-ho and feeling very brave were suddenly scared shitless, and excuse my language. And
that's don't fucking worry about it.
My friend assistant here is helping me. She, don't you curse, man. It's true. I do need to fucking clean up my language. But anyway, so the financial crisis hits, and FX, if you know anything about FX has been run its entire history by a guy named John Landgraf, who's brilliant. If you ever get a chance to meet John Landgraf, it's awesome. And so he had never had a failure. He had never had to cancel a show up until that point. Every single one of his shows succeeded. And that fall, they had essentially right at the same time, they had their 2 first big failures, a show called Lights Out, which was a boxing show, and a show called Terriers, which starred Donald Logue, and it was sort of about 2 ne'er-do-well cops, like beach cops kind of thing. And both of the shows failed, and he had to cancel both of them within 3 episodes, which is like crazy. I mean, that's a huge loss. And so suddenly he was scared. And all this energy that had been going into Laredo, we run into the financial crisis, his two first failures, and then he was just looking. And at the end of the day, it was us against American Horror Story. And, you know, sex and violence always sells. And he chose that. And he probably was smart to do so, because that's a more fantastical thing, and mine's very real. And suddenly, when you go through these hard times as a society, people don't want real, they want fantasy. And companies want fantasy. And so Laredo suddenly was too real. And that's the exact same thing that happened in Simple City. I wrote that in 2015, before Trump even announced that he was running for president. And it's essentially a study of authoritarianism in America. And when I first wrote it, people thought I was crazy, and they called it operatic and sort of out there. And they liked it, but it was considered fantasy, basically. And
now it's become documentary.
Well, then Trump won, and suddenly, literally, we were in the sales process right when Trump won. And the whole zeitgeist just went, flipped. And suddenly, I was way too on the nose. This is way too close to comfort, way too close to what's actually happening. And I'm like, dude, I wrote this before you even started running for office. So, anyway.
So the question, what do you have next? What else do you got? So.
Exactly. I'm writing about 1961 right now. I figured that would keep me safe.
That ain't going to change it.
It's not going to change.
Other questions, guys. Don't hop on in.
Let me hear you guys. Tell me what you're working on too, and what you guys. How many of you guys actually want to pursue writing career-wise, and think you're going to take a stab after school? Wow.
Good.
That's a lot. I'm impressed. It's a great time to be a young writer. I'll tell you that. We need young writers more than ever. And there's never been a better time to be in this business, even though it's kind of, everything's screwed up right now. But I was telling Jackie here that when I sold Laredo, and it was a big sale, we had like 5 or 6 buyers, so that's always awesome. And there were 13 purchasers of 1 hour dramatic content in Hollywood, FX, NBC, HBO, etc. 13. I think this last year when I went out with my latest project, we were considering 51 purchasers. So from 13 to 51. So.
And at the time, 13, you guys wouldn't think this, but that sounded like an immense number of buyers. What the, right? You remember that, Eric?
But now it's like literally every network is making 1 hour dramatic content because it's the most powerful way they can brand their network. Netflix is nothing without House of Cards and Orange is the New Black. And all of these companies, whether it's Crackle or DirecTV or AT&T or Apple TV or whatever the hell, they're all trying to develop 1 hour dramas because they know if they can just hook one, if there's one 1 hour drama on Apple TV that everybody's got to see, Apple TV is legit, you know? So it's a great time to be a young writer. It's a great time to be a young creator. And I encourage you all. That's cool that so many of you are thinking to do this. And I'll say this now, I'll say it later too, but I'm very truthful. If you ever want my help, contact me, send me something to read. I'd be happy to read it. And if you want advice, I'd be happy to help you in any way I can. And
now write that down and compare the next time somebody like Eric gives you that offer and see how long the lag is between. That's very generous. And Eric is committed. I know that to young writers, especially. He's a Yale down in his soul too. So
what does that even mean? I don't know what that means. Yale in my soul. I haven't been on campus in a long time.
And neither have we, Eric. Neither have we.
I'm talking 15 years.
Okay. Toby, yeah, you had an Akil. You have a couple questions.
Yeah, so I'm just a little bit curious about like what your writing process is, because you said that you spend a lot of time kind of in the planning phases, and then in your writer's notes, you know, there's a big portion dedicated to developing characters before you really start writing scenes. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, you know, what exactly your process looks like.
Okay. My process is relatively simple, but most people don't do it. So I think it's worth doing. I think the first thing you got to figure out is what the fuck you're trying to write about. What are you trying to say? What in its most simple form are you trying to say? You know, what is Macbeth about? Blood begets blood, right? Pretty much. What's your thesis? What are you starting with? Because I feel like if you don't have, I mean, that's your touchstone. That's what you're going to go back to every single day. And that's going to motivate you to move forward. And everything should have a point, you know? It can be simple. It can be the course of true love never doth run smooth. It can be whatever. But what are you trying to say? So you start with that. And that's pretty philosophical and high concept, I guess. And then I spend all of my time trying to figure out the right vehicles by which to tell that story. And by vehicles, I mean characters. And characters are your donkeys. You know, they are the trusted thing that's going to sort of pull you through a story. And so you want to find a character, the protagonist at least, that you can fall in love with and you can relate to, but you can understand your differences to that character. And so I sort of start like that, and I try to think of who's the primary character here that I want, you know, to write about. Like in the case of Laredo, it was really Blanca more than anybody else. Like she was fascinating to me, this idea of a young, highly educated daughter person who suddenly has to negotiate that world when she probably thought maybe she was going to escape it. To me, she was super interesting. And, you know, in all of them, I start to build characters and build. And then, you know, the plot I find is pretty easy if you know the characters. Let's see. It says my internet connection is unstable. Did I lose you guys?
You're pretty
No?
clear.
Here? Okay.
Come through
Got a
pretty.
little sign on.
Yes, the dreaded your internet.
So really, it's all about characters. All about characters. You can't tell me the plot for Sopranos season 3, but you can tell me all about the characters, you know. And so if you figure out the characters and if they're compelling people that you want to watch, and you want to watch them not only succeed, but you want to watch them fuck up, you know, you're onto something. I don't know. Did that answer your question, Toby? A little bit?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, it's something we talked about a lot. Characters will give you your plot, and yeah, Kill, you have just hop on in.
Yeah, so first of all, echoing everyone else, thank you so much for coming and talking to us. This has been so interesting to hear. So my project for this class is a political TV show, so I wanted to ask a little bit about that. I feel like there have been a lot of them since The West Wing, but they take like very different takes on politics. So having seen like the real world of politics and also TV, what do you think these shows are getting right? What are they getting wrong? And which one is doing it the best?
Well, a lot of them just exited the air, right? So a lot of the good ones are gone. I think Veep did it the best the last few years, pretty much. But the House of Cards obviously did some stuff right. I think what's hard about political shows is there's an emotional subtext to each show that is ultimately what's resonating with the audience and draws them into the viewing every week. And so I mean, The West Wing is one of the most idealistic shows of all time. I mean, it's just astonishingly good-hearted and good-natured, and trying to teach us all, you know, and that's a very unique emotional position for a show, and very hard to pull off. I mean, it takes Aaron Sorkin, you know, pretty much, and he's quite a genius in that way. But it's unusual because, like, obviously, if you look at House of Cards, that's a very cynical show, and in many ways, kind of the opposite. I think the best political shows these days have nothing to do with politics, or nothing to do with sort of traditional Washington D.C. kind of politics. I mean, The Wire is a political show, right? And so I think it's always hard to write about politics because you can't alienate half of the audience from the outset. You have to approach everything from a very kind of neutral position. And if you present all sides correctly, they'll trust you. And my goal as a writer is, even though I'm obviously out here talking about my political interests, my goal is that they don't know. My goal is that they don't know. I think there are people that could read some of my scripts and be like, this guy could be some Republican dude or whatever. I mean, like, they shouldn't be able to know. They shouldn't be able to know my politics because I should never be preaching. At least that's my philosophy. And if I'm going to preach, it's going to be from, like, you know, a drug addict or a hooker or something. That's where I preach from, you know. But I don't know. I think political shows are tricky. Hollywood hates political shows. Like, I'll tell you that. Don't walk into Hollywood and be like, I got a new political show. It's like not what they want to hear. But the point is, that's the most important type of show. And they're the shows that really help us understand society and our place in society. And so it's just trying to find new ways to skin that cat, you know? And I think the more local you get and the more sort of close in to whatever it is you get, the better. It's got to all be about family at the end of the day, and you've got to have a family at the, you know, core of your show. And there's a family at the core of West Wing. There's a family at the core of Veep, and there's even a family in House of Cards to some degree. So, but good question, Akil. What are you writing?
Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I'm actually trying to write like a family drama about like a political dynasty that's like trying to keep itself from falling apart.
Like the Kennedys?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Sounds familiar, Eric.
Yeah, I just sold a show on the Kennedys, so that's my whole thing right now. It's the Kennedys. But this guy's nuts, this John F. Kennedy character. That's a character right there.
Yeah, good. Other questions? Can I see? Yeah, Jacob, Isha.
Yeah, sort of going back to your last point about starting with what you want to say, what your point is. I find that a really interesting writing style, and something I find myself drawn to. But one of the challenges I often find with that is avoiding making your characters just like mouthpieces for a philosophy and really just oriented around like something very highly moralistic without actually like developing like in like a realness to them as people. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you avoid that sort of trap when you start with your point rather than starting with your characters.
It's a genius question, Jacob. Very good question. I put them in a pile of shit and I fucking roll them around.
Yeah.
Okay. And I want to see how they put their underwear on, and I want to just make them as human as possible, and I want to see all their flaws. And if you start with that, then you'll earn the right for them to maybe give a speech at some point. But it's very rare. Like, I think I start Simple City a little bit with a speech that one of the young characters has. But that's, like, unusual for me. Simple City is an unusual script for me. I could tell you the process of that, which is pretty crazy, but it was a very high-profile project for a while until Trump got elected. And and I had a lot of freedom on that project. I was coming out of Murder in the First, and I had had a lot of success, and so people were willing to just kind of run with me. And so I took a few more risks with that script than I probably would have otherwise taken. And, you know, I like it, but I think the key for me is just always to just get them dirty and like place them in real life situations of conflict and trial and tribulation. And let's watch them get through that. And if they get through that in a way that's impressive or resonates to us, then there's certainly room for a conversation where they talk about what's underneath that. But yeah, you can't preach. That's for sure. That turns off readers quickly.
Yeah, great. Jacob, that's something you've talked about in workshop, and so it's great to hear.
Yeah.
Isha, you have a question, and anybody else, hop on in.
Yeah, it's funny that you say the thing about political dramas because similar to A Kill Mine is also a political drama. But my question about that, I guess,
dailies, this is what we do, you
know? With Simple City, you mentioned it became too on the nose, and so I guess two questions sort of jumping off of one another. One is like when you're writing these characters, you also try to make them as human as possible, but when you're researching them, where do you get this research from to prevent it from being too on the nose or like developing them into these humans? I think Jacob's question touched a little bit upon that. And in addition to that, if you have to pivot something a little bit, like for example, for Simple City, like are you going to pivot the show a little bit? Like how are they addressing when they're worried about things being similar to like the real world?
Okay, two good questions, two different questions. So in terms of the second question, like Simple City and the politics of Hollywood, you must understand, Hollywood this is no Wild West. This is a very conservative business at this point. This is a very established business, and everybody operates on fear, and they're all afraid of their own shadows, basically. And I have never been through a project with a corporation, and I've had 15 or 20, where the person who hired me at the beginning still had that job at the end. So every single one of my projects, literally the people that purchase the idea, bring me in to do the idea, then they're fired for some other reason. And suddenly I got to deal with some whole new team of executives. This has happened to me constantly, all the time. I mean, I think the lifespan for Hollywood executives like a year. And it takes longer than that to put a show together. So it's very unusual when you find situations like Landgraf, who's been at FX forever or something like that. And if you can get in good with a person like that, you can stick around for a long time. But they're just fear-based. So the way it manifests itself is suddenly they don't know what's happening. Everybody thought Hillary was going to win. All these Hollywood people thought Hillary was going to win. And they were all sort of planning on that zeitgeist. And they were shocked when Trump won. And so what Hollywood does is just like what's happening right this second with the coronavirus. They just stop. They just stop spending money. They just shut down everything. And so when Trump first won, everything got sort of stopped and shut down for a minute as all the creative executives tried to figure out, what the new zeitgeist was. And I just ran into that. It's almost as simple as that. And unfortunately, the way Hollywood works, it's like you get these kind of one shots and you build this whole project together and you align it and you sort of ship it out into the world. And if you miss that first time around, that's it. Because these are all, what misses means, to miss means the CEO of a buyer has processed the script and said no and pass. And so you have to wait for a whole new leadership group to come in to even reconsider. Like I still have the studio and all these people associated with Simple City. So theoretically it could still come back to life. And I think the last conversation we had was about a year ago when it was simply like, we have to wait for a bunch of these executives to get fired so we can like reapproach all these networks and have a fresh set of eyes. So that's pretty crazy. But let's see. Did I answer your question? Oh, in terms of, what was the other part? The first part?
Yes, it ended up being 2 questions. The second one being like, when you're researching your characters, how do you get that inspiration, especially if they have like specific occupations or
right? How do I get into the diversity of characters? I'm a like white guy, right? So I'll tell you exactly how I do it. Gonzo. I go and I live there and I sit there and I make friends and I talk to people and I dig myself in as deeply as I possibly can. I mean, I lived in Simple City for about 2 weeks. I went to the projects, man. I knew everybody there. I knew every single person there. And for me, I did that on Laredo the first time and it worked so well for me that it was, because obviously I'm not these characters, but I have to love them. I have to relate to them. I have to understand them. They have to be a little piece of me here and there. But more importantly, I have to, if I'm writing something, or someone from a different background, typically those are words that I've heard come out of somebody's mouth. It's not usually my words,
Thank you.
You mentioned you're somewhat journalistic, but that's kind of that immersive thing that journalists do.
Yeah, gonzo journalism, Hunter S. Thompson. You got to just get into the world that you're trying to write about. And if you really want to tell a story about drug dealers, it's advisable that you know a few drug dealers.
Ride around with some narcotraficantes in Mexico.
Narcotraficantes, yes. Mexico. Oh, I have the greatest story ever about that. I don't have time for it today, but one day I got a story. Mimi Rogers is a debutante from Houston, Texas, who married the biggest drug lord in like the late 80s in Guadalajara, Mexico. And there's a book called Drug Lord that you can purchase, and it's about this incredible story. And she was this white debutante from Houston, Texas, who married like the most vicious dude in all of Mexico, who ended up dying in a shootout between 2 cartels on the streets of Guadalajara. And I went to his gravesite. Anyway, Mimi drove me around. She drove me around. And she was untouchable. She was like drug cartel royalty. She's like a white lady from Houston, Texas, who's like drug cartel royalty. And she would just drove me around the cartels and like people would not mess with her. So you got to find good mules
to follow. Yeah. Excellent. Let's see. Adrian and Toby, you guys have your hands up.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. It's interesting that you mentioned writing a series about the Kennedys. I'm not in this class, but in another class about a feature film. I'm writing a high-profile historical piece, and I have a lot of anxiety when it comes to sort of creating a character that is a historical figure. And so I guess like when it comes to doing that, how do you sort of like develop the confidence to sort of take on that? Like, because I feel like I'm always looking to do as much research as possible so I don't get it wrong. But like the Kennedys, for example, like they've been portrayed so many different ways and people have different takes on them. So I'm curious like how you sort of like develop a confidence in your approach to these historical figures.
I'm not sure I develop a confidence. I'm just sort of stupid and proceed forward. Research and reading is the number one thing. Kennedy's so great because there's infinite history now. And there's so many books and there's so much like legitimate oral record. And so I think when you're attacking a historical figure, first and foremost, the rule should be kind of medical, like do no harm. Everything that every word I can put in that character's mouth that they actually said in real life is a victory. And of course, sometimes you have to cut corners and do your own dialogue and your own pillow talk in particular. And I think pillow talk is where the magic happens when you're dealing with historical figures, because obviously nobody knows what the fuck they were talking about on their pillows. So you present the public aspect of them in a very historically accurate way. And then you take your liberties within kind of the interpersonal relationships and that's where you can kind of tell the emotional side of the story. But you have to have an opinion about the character, I mean, I have an opinion about John F. Kennedy, and it's probably not a very popular one, because I kind of think he was a scumbag. I mean, he's getting 19-year-old interns pregnant and stuff, and like, I mean, he was not straight all the way. And but he was also a wonderful figure. He was in many ways and a brilliant man. So that's what interests me about him, is that the only portrayals of him have been putting him on a pedestal. And the truth is, he's a very interesting and flawed man, and that's a very interesting criminal family, you know. And
one thing, Eric, but you got these internal, these contradictions. You don't want to avoid those. You want to.
No, that's what you want. Nah, that's what makes it good.
Right.
No, when I started, so I got into this because I got hired to write a movie about the Berlin Wall crisis, 1961. So Berlin Wall crisis is phenomenal. And I didn't really know much about it. I studied it a little bit at Yale and a little bit when I was in high school and stuff. But other than that, I hadn't really studied it much. And so I went back and I started to write this whole big movie with Scott, in fact, one of our fellow writer friends, on the Berlin Wall crisis. And in the process of that, I really got to know John F. Kennedy in a much deeper way. And I was like, this is the greatest television character of all time. I mean, he's a total anti-hero. He's like saving people's lives and getting interns pregnant and shooting his ass up with amphetamines and like out of control in so many ways. I mean, he had Asperger's disease, and Bobby had like vials stored all around the nation. So no matter what town he went into on a campaign, if he had an episode, he could go to the bank and take out a safety deposit box and inject himself with his medicine. They're paying off Sam Giancana to buy votes in Chicago. I mean, this is like a crazy dude. And I'm like, this is Tony Soprano or something, but a different version. So I love it. You know, I love characters that have that kind of complexity. That's what we want to watch. And especially a guy like him, where we're all kind of confused about it because we love him, and yet we're all kind of like, should we? I don't know, maybe, I guess.
Yeah, good.
Did that help you, Adrian? I don't know. Did that help?
Yes, that was very helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, but yeah, use the pillow talk. Use the pillow talk.
That's the hardest part, yeah.
Toby and Carrie, you have comments.
Yeah, so one of the things I liked about Simple City, I like the sort of aspects of magical realism kind of woven into it. The project that I'm working on, it involves like cults and the West, and is going to deal with kind of like elements of the unreal. And I'm kind of wondering, you know, how do you balance that without kind of going over the top with it? Like how much, you know...
Did I?
No. But I'm wondering.
I don't know.
Like,
you tell me. I'm saying I don't know.
What sort of tolerance there is for that amongst like audiences, and like if that's a viable thing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Of course, it's viable. If it's good, it's viable.
Cool.
You know, you can't do too much of it. You got to use it carefully and cautiously, and it needs to like have real specific and sharp purpose. But one of the coolest moments in the JFK film, the 61 Berlin Wall film I did, is a magical realism moment, basically, where he's alone in his room, and you know, at some point Jackie started living basically at Glenora, which is a house in Virginia, and so he was kind of alone at the White House, thus the interns. And there's a scene where there's sort of a magical realism scene where he starts to kind of almost hallucinate. He puts on in his room in the bottom drawer, and I just made this up, but in the bottom drawer, he opens it up and there's like a gas mask, because we're in the middle of kind of nuclear fear mongering, and people had gas masks and underground bunkers and so forth. And he just sort of takes this gas mask and puts it on and just looks out the window. And I didn't know how it was going to work, but everybody loved it. So, you know, if you find these right moments where you can almost do what I was saying at the outset, which is you can kind of put a pin in your theories, put a pin in your thesis. You know, like, I guess in many ways, my JFK thesis is this is a young and talented man overwhelmed all the way to the end. and he did his best for sure, but like the world's coming at him at unbelievable speeds, and his level of power is so extraordinary that I don't think anybody could totally handle it successfully. So putting that mask on, you know, there's thematics to that that are bigger in terms of the whole piece. And it's just like in the Simple City, the cicadas. And that's really to mark an opening. I mean, because the way I wrote Simple City is a little bit more Shakespearean in structure, or you know, whatever. There's Greek chorus to it. There's very clear acts and so forth. And you know, the cicadas, which I think happen on like page 4 or 5, just really mark the beginning of the story. And and in that case, again, if you're going to use magical realism, find it deeply rooted in your story to begin with. So like growing up in Washington, D.C., as I did, there are these things called cicadas. I don't know how many of you have heard of cicadas, but they come around 17 years, once every 17 years, and they like take over the earth. They're the most bizarre biblical thing ever. They come out of the ground and suddenly they're everywhere and you can barely see. And this lasts for weeks. And then they all die and you don't see them for 17 years. And so I've been through 2 of these in DC, and I found them both to be just incredibly strange moments. And it felt like a great way to kind of open this Shakespearean Caesar story. So I use it like that. I use it like almost operatically. We haven't talked much about my background in music, and that's a huge part of how I write. I was a musician first and foremost, and everything. I think the most important thing you can have as a writer, especially as a dramatic writer, is an ear. An ear. You have to be able to hear dialogue, and you can instantly tell when somebody has an ear or not. And it's basically how most professional writers read young writers. It's just like, do they have an ear or not? And and for me, I you know, my benefit was studying music growing up and having to sort of learn composition and how melodies and sounds create emotional landscapes. And I apply those very same philosophies to writing. It's all a piece of music to me. It's gotta move like music, you know? If there's a moment where there's suddenly a rest and everything stops, you know, you're screwed.
This connects to something else you mentioned, the ability to write in other voices that you did as when you were writing for politicians. There's many ways to train an ear, but writers are good mimics. Writers tend to, you've got to be able to hear many. It helps if you have lots of voices chattering in your head like so many writers do, but outside voices too.
You guys read your scripts out loud? I hope so. Do you like say the words out of your mouth? After you write a couple pages, do you go back and like speak the words? I suggest you do. It helps a lot.
I like acting them, and I always feel a little crazy doing it.
Of course. We're crazy. I mean, you know, paid schizophrenics here. But we got to, if you can't say it, come on.
Right. An actor can't say it if you can't say it. If you don't, it's hard to see flaws, but it's easier. Again, back to the ear that you're talking about, Eric. You can hear them immediately. Very good discipline.
Yeah, no, ear is key. And it's exactly what you should be listening as you read, which is a bizarre concept, but it's critical to doing this.
Yeah, Carrie, you had a question, and we have time for a couple more here. And then, alas, we will.
Yeah.
Carrie, hop on in.
Yeah, so I had a question sort of about what you're talking about, like political writing, because I really loved reading Simple City, and I saw that it was sort of like based on Julius Caesar, and I was really surprised to hear that it was actually that you worked on it before Trump, because I
know, right?
I became sort of obsessed with like Julius Caesar adaptations right after the election. So I just thought it was like so relevant, and I feel like that is like, I mean, when I read that, I just thought it was like such a political script, and like I guess I have a really hard time separating myself and my politics from anything I write. And like I know that you need to show both sides of all the stories and you need to like humanize all of the characters, but I think that I always feel afraid of like humanizing characters and like justifying beliefs that I don't want to be justifying. If that makes sense, especially like right now, because I feel like everything is so political right now and like the stakes are really high. So I guess I'm just like wondering like how do you balance that? Like I honestly probably think that everything I write is too political for Hollywood and I need to like
Awesome question. No, I mean, this is the question. This is the question. It's like, okay, here's what I'm facing on this JFK project right now. And it's in like big hands right now. By showing JFK fully, not only his great triumphs and successes, but also the weaker aspects of his character, there's a fear that I'm normalizing Trump, that I'm somehow showing that, you know, philandering happens and blah, blah, blah. And of course, that's not what I'm trying to do. It has nothing to do with Trump, you know, it's 1961. But see, these are the kinds of things that they think about. And so I guess my answer, Carrie, is it's hard. It's almost like the challenge of trying to do this is trying to navigate that line between the message you're trying to make, because we're all trying to make messages here, you know, and then succeeding in the marketplace and getting something through the system. And without a doubt, there's a Trojan horse aspect to all of it. You know, it's got to be hidden. If it's out in front, people will just instantly label it as political and they'll just wipe it away. Got to be sneaky.
It's an excellent question. And what's the responsibility of the writer, especially? And part of that is you're writing drama, drama has different rules than politics in a way. Politics can be dramatic, but kind of what you're saying, Eric, is you be true to the character. That seems to be the best you can do.
Just get down to the character. Just keep it personal. Keep it as personal as possible. Like, I don't think a character should be giving a political speech unless their life depends on it, right? And so again, it's just like I said crudely 20 minutes ago. It's like, how do you take them and you throw them in a pile of shit and you move them around and you dirty them up and you get real. And you know, nobody cares about politics when somebody's heart's exploding. Let's just get this person to the hospital, right? And then the politics will come out underneath. But I feel like that's, in a way, that's the scam. The scam is trying to figure out ways to work your stuff in without it feeling like that. And that's what'll make it effective. It's effective when it sneaks up on people, you know.
And when it doesn't seem preachy, as you mentioned earlier, that's a huge cardinal sin of
Yes.
drama writing.
And it's the cardinal sin that most young writers make, especially most smart young Yale writers that have great command of prose. No, I mean, I say this as one of them. I wrote a whole bunch of bullshit. Like, you know, you got this command of prose that you want to show off, and you've got this, you know, some ideas and so forth. But at the end of the day, the prose does not matter.
Well, we're coming up on, I think, one more question here, guys, for our time frame. So is anybody who hasn't had a chance to ask a question, anybody wanna hop in? Thought I saw a couple of hands go up there.
I'm looking at all of you.
Yep, and can do it all at once now.
Look at the grid. Zach, you've been awfully quiet.
Zach is actually himself a music major. Maybe.
Yeah,
Look at that.
actually. Yeah, I guess what I'm kind of curious about is maybe a more technical kind of thing.
Right.
Because I've done a lot of performance and kind of music based thing. So I'm kind of used to a world of dialogue and coming into the screenwriting and just like trying to figure out that balance of action and visual with the writing and kind of incorporating how a character acts into their voice. Um, I've just been kind of curious because there are a couple of action sequences in your scripts, and I've been trying to work on a piece that has some level of action in it, and wondering how you, you know, embody basically what a character's voice is in their physical action, and that kind of it's not dialogue, but it's that space between the dialogue where you're describing the visual component of the script.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if that's clear at all.
Yeah,
Or
I
that's
get
just
you. Okay, so here's how I think about it. Absolutely a rule: show it, don't say it. If you can show it and you don't have to say it, it's much more powerful. Always. Like, words are almost your final weapon in a script, and you can communicate so much through simple actions, and oftentimes they're much more powerful dramatically than words. We all know words are cheap, right? But if you see somebody actually helping an old lady across the street with no words, then you understand something more about that person. So, anytime you can show a trait versus having to explain it, you've succeeded. That's why I almost think I did this first, and I'm not totally suggesting this, but maybe some of you will think it's interesting. The first thing I wrote was a silent film, but I wrote it like all action slugs. And so it was this thing called the Locrian mode, which you're a musician, so you know Locrian. And, Locrian's the most bizarre scale with its bizarre construction. It's sort of circular in nature, and you can never really figure out where you are in the beginning or the end. And so I thought this was an interesting kind of concept for a short film, and I wanted to see how many emotions I could portray in a film without using dialogue. Could I take somebody sort of through the full spectrum of human emotions in some sort of bizarre visual story? And that was my first short film, Locrian. But it was because I knew, like, ultimately I could do the dialogue stuff. All of you can do the dialogue. If you can speak, eventually you'll be able to do the dialogue stuff. But I wanted to understand how to do the rest of it, which is really to portray emotions through visuals and through simple emotional moments. And so the first thing I wrote was like a silent film. It was like 3 pages, called Locrian. We won a bunch of film festivals, and it's out there somewhere. I don't know. I'll have to find it. I'll send it to you. But it was an exercise. I didn't think it was going to become anything. I just thought, like, let me first learn how to do emotions visually. So I don't know. That's what I did. But I hear you, because that's a great question. It's just, I think your instincts are right, which is, if you feel that talent and you feel a comfort level with dialogue, stay far away from dialogue until you get the other stuff good, because that's your strength, And you'll go right back to that. I'm not saying long term. I'm just saying this is. I think so much of the game is visual description. Think about Apollo 13. I mentioned my friend Bill Broyles. Has everybody seen Apollo 13? I assume mostly. Okay. The most powerful moments in that film are totally in silence, just like in Castaway too. Like in Apollo 13, there's that one moment where, like, they finally go around the dark side of the moon, and he just looks back at Earth through the window, and it's this feeling of isolation, this feeling of separation. It's like everything. It's the whole emotional core of the movie, and it's literally in silence, and it's just Hanks looking out the window back at Earth. And Bill wrote that. It's like beautifully written, and it was intentional. And just like in Castaway, I mean, what's one of the best moments in Castaway is when he takes the flashlight and he just clicks it on and clicks it off, clicks it on, clicks it off, and he's looking at the picture of his wife, and he clicks it on, and he clicks it off, clicks it on, and he clicks it off. It's like that's all you fucking need to know. That's it. So that aspect of storytelling, that's the money stuff. That's what people look for. That's what the agents look for. That's what the managers look for. That's what everybody looks for. Because most people try to tell you what to feel, but good drama shows you, you know.
Well, great. And this has been a terrific, just great conversation, Eric.
Good. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Here's my email. You can see my name on there. It's eric@ericlodal.com. And if any of you guys want me to read a script or you have questions about coming out here or doing this, I will do what I can to respond, for sure. And it's a pleasure. I love meeting young writers and Yaleys. I can't believe I was a Yaley at one point. That's pretty cool. And now my friend Derek is your professor. This is great.
And it's a strange world right now. So it is a great pleasure to hear from you, man. It's always fun to talk, and we'll chat a little after the session here, because
yeah, give me a call. But all the students, email me if you want to email me, eric@ericlodal.com. I'll read your scripts and I'll give you advice, and email Derek too. He's got my info. And then keep the faith and just do it, because like there are first responders right now, okay? Like firemen, doctors, people saving people's lives right now. And then there are second responders, and they're called writers. Writers. And like, it's up to writers to mend the soul of the nation here. So get on with it.
That's great, Eric. And we definitely appreciate your time and your generosity in doing this. Well, it's hard to have an applause on Zoom, but thanks, man.
All right. Well, my pleasure, guys. Thank you all.
And our pleasure. And I'll give you a call shortly. And guys, stick around after Eric leaves, and we'll do a quick debrief.
Right. And I'm leaving. Goodbye, everybody. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks again, pal. We'll talk shortly.
Thank you.
All right, guys.